It's okay. Oh, childhood. Okay, yes. Yes,
Test.
Okay. Yes. 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 The child.
Professor is very very
I like I like professors who are they're very free and to express their opinion on something. I like that better than like very dry, very robotic. Very like, oh my god, this is 1 hour of just saying words and you're all my prisoners. Yeah. No, it's not like that because if I have courses where it's like very dry, so dry that you're like just it's almost like have you heard of friends watching paint dry? So it feels like because it's dry, right?
Did you fix your feedback problem?
Yeah.
Okay,
Anyway,
good.
yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I know it's
I think it's like almost.
Okay, so we're gonna start everybody. I should use this in that case. Hi everybody. So thanks for coming tonight. So we're New Bloom Magazine. We run this space. We're also a publication that writes on Taiwanese politics and social issues. And so as you know tonight, the event is on Formosa Plastics and its effects around the world. This is a very cool exhibition for the launch of a new online data archive on Formosa Plastics by Tim and a bunch of other very cool researchers. And we're going to exhibit today with court drawings, documents, and other things regarding Formosa Plastics. And so this is an issue that I find very personally rewarding to have organized, been part of that, because just we've written on this issue in the past few years. And so I'll leave it to Tim, take it away, and discuss more about what's coming on.
Wow. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Full house. First of all, I want to thank Brian and Daniel and everybody at New Bloom for hosting us. We put the exhibit together in quite a short time, and I'm very happy how we did it and to show you the result today. And I want also to say that New Bloom has covered Formosa Plastics quite regularly over the last year. So I'm very happy that we can connect to the journalism and coverage of Formosa Plastics that Brian and others have been doing. As Brian said, the Formosa Plastics archiving project is not just me, even though I will be leading you through this presentation and give you a tour through the archive. But first, I would like to invite Professor Wenling Tu to give a few opening remarks. And also, when Professor Wenling Tu is one of the reasons why I'm here, because she supported my research. I came only 6 months ago in the middle of the pandemic. Against all odds, we managed to get me here from Southern California. And so if you would just give a few opening remarks. And okay. A round of applause.
Hi everyone. My name is Whitney Tu, the Dean of International College of Innovation at National Zhengzhou University. And I'm very happy to be here and to be with him. Okay. I think I have a multiple role for this special event. So I'm going to say something about this event from different perspective. And I think first of all, on behalf of the ICI, a newly funded international college focusing on interdisciplinary teaching and research. I'm very proud of having team here with us in our initial year. So this is our, like a second semester, the college second semester. And I think his visiting to ICI actually provide a very good example of international exchange, enrich our co-learning, co-design, and the co-production program. So thank you, Tim.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, second, and I think as a research collaborator in the STS Disaster Network and the HMAR File project, I also like to thank team as well as my many of my colleagues here and my assistants to make this academic research project visualized and accessible to the public in this very special public space. I think it's very challenging work, and you all make it. So congratulations. And third, as a co-founder for the 6 Nonprofit platform, so-called 六亲平台 under the Environmental Rights Foundation, which has been concerned about environmental injustice issue around the fence-like community of the petrochemical sites. And this exhibition, I think, connects the community across borders, across the countries. So one community in one locality is not feeling alone, suffering, the pollution anymore. We all can learn from each other and find solution together. So I think this is quite meaningful, to have this special event. So this is the starting point of civic data for environmental justice, and I'm glad everyone here is all part of that great work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, thank you very much for the introduction and for supporting the research. Okay. Could you go to the first slide? So again, just a brief overview. The first part of the presentation is going to be a very brief introduction about Formosa Plastics in Taiwan and very brief overview of different locations. And then we're going to do a virtual tour of the archive, which is again going to take us to Taiwan, Texas, Vietnam, and southern Louisiana. And we're going to show some of the data that is now available publicly in the archive, what the challenges were or are, what the possibilities are for using them for civic purposes. And we're going to have a few people like Paul Jobin, who contributed to the exhibit, come on stage and say a few words about the project. So next slide. Just a brief backstory. So again, my name is Tim Schütz. I'm currently a PhD student in anthropology, second year at University of California, Irvine. And I came through this research through an interest in civic data, in ways that we can use digital technology and knowledge infrastructure, public knowledge infrastructure, to make environmental problems visible. Going all the way back to websites like this, that doesn't maybe look very exciting, but it was very exciting when it came out in the 1990s. There's a website called Scorecard, which Greenpeace back then considered the gold standard for addressing environmental problems or making them understandable for a wider public. There's a project developed by a chemist called Bill Pease in San Francisco, and this really came out after right to know legislation really took off in the United States, and companies had to make pollution data accessible, right? And here you can enter your zip code. So this website, you can enter your zip code and see what polluting facilities are in your neighborhood. And they have a score guide to assess how hazardous and how much at risk you are. So this was very new back then. So next slide. Of course, this has much evolved since then, but that's kind of a research question for me and a research question for our team at UCI. What actually has changed over the last 30 years of right-to-know legislation? We definitely need more visualization and data capacity, especially in hotspots like Houston. This is a slide I borrowed from Kim Fortune, who grew up in Houston. What you see here are petrochemical facilities and who have to produce so-called risk management plans and worst case scenarios. So they have to estimate the blast zone, how much, which area would be affected if there's a disaster. And the blue spots are schools. So makes very starkly visible the kind of risk that is concentrated here in these petrochemical communities, right? And we interestingly, this Center for Effective Government was doing a lot of the work similar to Scorecard, very attentive, but they are no longer in existence, like Scorecard actually as well. Scorecard doesn't exist anymore. So it's an interesting research to see how that capacity shifts over time. And just to situate the work that we are doing alongside that of colleagues, here is a slide, this one, from the Environmental Data Governance Initiative in Canada, and in the US, that has been doing very great work after the Trump administration came into power to document, they do many different things, but next slide. What they first started doing is they were saving climate change data from the EPA that Trump was trying to disappear. And they also tracked how the EPA website was changing over time. So how words like climate change were slowly disappearing from certain sites. So they used web scraping to track that. So this is the kind of civic data initiatives that I'm very interested in. Okay, but let's get to Formosa Plastics. So I learned about Formosa Plastics, I think about 2 years ago when we were doing field research in southern Louisiana, in an area along the Mississippi River known as Cancer Alley, activists came up with the label because it has the highest cancer rate in the United States. And Formosa Plastics wants to build a new 9.4 billion chemical complex. It's actually 14 new factories, mostly producing single-use plastic. And I think the number is now actually about 13 billion. So, but it hasn't been built. It's proposed, and there's a lot of struggle around it. And actually, around that time, Professor Tu and colleagues were actually also coming to Louisiana, to Louisiana and Texas to meet activists there. So we were there at the same time. It's kind of the first meeting. And so this is when I learned about it, I became very interested. Next slide. So just a brief overview of Formosa Plastics is a Taiwanese petrochemical conglomerate. Really integral to the Taiwanese economy, and a long-standing company founded in 1954 by Wang Yingqing and Wang Yingcai, two brothers, who have since died, and now their children have taken over the company. And if you go to the next slide, this is a slide that this one. I think Formosa used to contribute almost 30% of the GDP. I think now it's 10 down to 10%, which also tells you something about where the industry is going, and we can talk about that. But it's this really contributed to the Taiwanese economy. And there's a slide that I borrowed from colleagues in Louisiana who have been following Formosa, and you can see there are so these are all the sectors that Formosa Plastics is involved, and even though it's Taiwan Plastics, Taisu, they do much more. They are actually in the steel sector. They are in electronics. They run the largest hospital network, I think, in Asia, or at least one of the largest hospitals here in Taiwan. So their reach is very wide. Yeah, and this kind of nested and very kind of confusing structure is actually one reason why it's hard to keep them accountable. Yeah, but let's move on. If you want to know more about the history of Formosa Plastics, you can visit the Formosa Plastics Museum in Taoyuan. So I not say more about the history for now, but we have visited the museum and we can answer all the questions you have. But of course, you will get a very particular story about Formosa Plastics here. You know, when you walk in, there's a huge piece of wood, and the message, which the founder acquired, I think in New Zealand, I don't remember exactly, but the message was that this piece of wood represents Formosa Plastic, which should be, you know, the company should be as durable and long living as this piece of wood. But that's just the start. But next slide. Yeah, but it's incredibly well done. Most people that I talk to, they're like, huh, there's a museum, Formosa Plastics Museum? Never heard about it, but it's six floors, and we actually have a little part of the exhibit is about this museum. There's even a replica of the 6th naphtha cracker plant in Yunlin in the floor. It's quite amazing. So and this is a reminder why I think we need public knowledge infrastructure that is an alternative to this museum, and we need civic data to interrogate these stories. Okay. So again, this is an overview. We're going to go into each of these different sites during the tour, but I wanted to give you some more scope of how Formosa is not only an issue in Taiwan. I mean, it definitely is, because there are numerous issues in Yunlin County where one Formosa plant is. There's another one in Kaohsiung. And Yunlin explosions are just one example. So it's an aging facility. There have been frequent upsets and explosions there, and air pollution and water contamination are pretty severe issues that Professor Tu, for example, and the naphtha cracker platform have been organizing around. Then a Formosa steel factory in Vietnam caused probably Vietnam's worst environmental disaster in central Vietnam by releasing toxic chemicals and killing basically all the fish in 4 cities or 4 towns in Vietnam, and putting a lot of fishermen out of work, actually forcing people to migrate out of Vietnam. We were going to hear more about that, and there's a slideshow downstairs. Oops, sorry, can I go back? But it was interesting, it's a Formosa steel factory, it's not a plastics factory. So the case is actually in court right now, and it's being kind of shuttled between Taiwan and Vietnam where to handle this case, and the fishermen have not been, as far as I know, not compensated. So, and then there's resistance in Louisiana where Formosa wants to expand. So there's Louisiana, and then there's Texas. So now we're still on the Gulf Coast, but now we're in Texas, and this is really where our archiving work started. This is Diane Wilson, a shrimp fisher woman in, I think, 4th generation, who lives in Calhoun County, which is where Formosa plastics facility is located in the town of Point Comfort. And she, with a group of workers, many of them who became whistleblowers, so speaking out about the kind of issues in that plant, which is also one of Formosa's oldest plants. So Formosa, after there was a lot of resistance in Taiwan, Formosa moved to Texas and established this first factory. There were also other ones in Delaware and in Illinois, some of which are now closed, but this one is still operating. And what she did, they have been collecting plastic pallets, so little plastic pieces that are continuously being released from the factory over the last 5 years. And they actually used this evidence to win a lawsuit or a settlement against Formosa Plastics. This is, with $50 million, is the largest civic-led clean water lawsuit in the US history. So it's really a significant win. Next slide. And Netflix actually picked up on it and produced one episode of Dirty Money about the case, even though it's before the settlement was reached. And the story, it really nicely tells the story of US and in Taiwan relation through Formosa, but it doesn't say anything about Louisiana, for example, and it's before the case was closed. So, but yeah, there's recognition of this case. Next slide. So, okay, so what do I have to do with that? So my advisor, Kim Fortune, she's actually friends with Diane, or they've been moving kind of in the same circles. Kim Fortune started her career doing research on the Bhopal disaster, gas leak disaster in 1984, which was about Union Carbide plant in India, but there's also Union Carbide plant in Texas. And Diane Wilson, this was one of the first times that she became aware of environmental issues, and this gas disaster, which is still considered the worst industrial disaster in history, really jump-started a lot of the things like green industry, right to know, etc. So Kim and Diane, they were meeting back then, and they actually met in Bhopal. They both went to Bhopal. Again, Diane is kind of on the activist track, Kim Fortune is in academia, but they've remained friends. And I think last year around this time, we got back in touch with Diane and asked her, what do you do with all these documents that you've acquired over the last 10 years? Like, how do you document the work that you're doing? The next slide. And so she said, yeah, well, I'm contributing some of the plastic pieces that I collect to this website called Nerdle Patrol, which is another instance of civic data I find very impressive. It's located at UT Texas, and they accept donations for these plastic pieces and map where they've been found by volunteers. Next slide. But Diane was also making her own website and slowly uploading and sharing some information about the lawsuit. But she told us that it's very, it's time consuming, and she doesn't have all the resources to do it, and could use some support. So our team thought, okay, we as researchers in a public university, I think we can lend support and maybe also help connect this case to communities, to other Formosa communities. And I just want to say, people know each other already. It's not that we are, making connections that haven't been made before. So Diane has come to Taiwan, Louisiana, and Texas have very close connections, but I would argue there could be more infrastructure to share data and support the work. So, and then there are projects like Project Toxic Dogs. It's just another example. If you go to the next slide, it's run by two professors in New York. They have a lot of historic and declassified information about the petrochemical industry, also about Formosa. So it's not completely novel to be collecting and releasing this kind of information. But their database is not made for social scientists, for example. It's not made to allow a virtual exhibition or add more commentary. This is really just making the data available, and it's mostly historic, like from the 1980s onwards. Okay, so next slide. So finally, we're getting closer to what we've been building. So at the University of California, Irvine, there's a design team which includes Professor Kim Fortune and her husband, Mike Fortune, and a couple of other graduate students and colleagues that have been developing a software called PEACE, the platform for digital collaborative, for experimental collaborative ethnography. That is a software that enables social scientists to archive, share, analyze, and make public all kinds of data, which is also, again, something that in our disciplines we don't really have. Like in the environmental domain, there's a lack of infrastructure. It's not like in the life sciences where we have huge genomics databases where we can collaborate. We don't really have that. So I found this a very innovative project and wanted to join. And one instance of this software is the Disaster STS Research Network. And STS just stands for Science and Technology Studies. So this is kind of one community of practice where disaster researchers like Professor Wen Ling Tu and Paul Jobin and others can come together to work together. Yeah, and this on this next slide is on this platform where we are now building the Formosa Plastics Global Archive. And so this is something that we started working on after talking to Diane last summer, and this is when I started to make plans to to come to Taiwan, because Diane started to send us documents, send us things from her barn, what you saw earlier in the picture, because she also said, well, I've already lost boxes of things because there are frequent hurricanes and flooding. There was, an unsurvivable hurricane just last year in Texas. So she said, we really have to, get moving on this and archive. Yeah. All right. Next slide. Yeah. And so I will take you for the remaining time before we do Q&A. I want to take you through some of the material. Okay. I think you can just click in here. Yeah, you can click on it first, and then it takes you to the website. Yeah, so this is the website, and maybe I can just say that there are different privacy features, because this is one of the most important things. There is data that can be widely shared, that can be publicly available, and then there are more sensitive data that can only be shared within our research group, or if you are registered on the platform. But actually, if you're interested, I encourage you to sign up. And if you're interested, you can have access to these documents. But what you're going to see are mostly the publicly available data that we're going to show you now. Okay, so maybe let's start with Diane, actually. Go to Calhoun County. So one way into the archive is organized by place. And so the platform kind of works like a shadow box or like a collage. So you can put different kinds of artifacts next to each other. It's quite nice. And so maybe we start with the video, because actually Diane wanted to send us a small video. If you could play, sorry. You need to, yeah. Just the first 2 minutes. as you can tell, Diane is a great. No problem. Diane is a great storyteller, and is really, I can already encourage you to look at the video, which is we added to the archive, where she talks about how she has collaborated with workers from inside the plant. And so if you maybe just click on view essay here. Again, you also got an overview of the kind of data that is available. We have a documentation from Diane how they exactly collected these plastic pellets. So again, one of the main issues is that this factory, in addition to air pollution issues, constantly releases small plastic pieces and plastic powder, which is also why the shrimp, nobody's really shrimp fishing there anymore. And this is just, if you maybe go a little bit further, just so you can see the scope. One more. Well, you can see it better online. So this is, for example, a sample of the plastic powder. If you go more. And one more. Yeah, and one more. So they collected over 2,500 samples, and I think this is really impressive. And this is what made the difference for this settlement. So you can close that. Maybe just give a small impression from the palette reports. If you go all the way down. Yes, one more down. The palette and powder reports. Yeah. So these, for example, if you view the essay, it's organized in a timeline. Those are the leaked company reports. If you click through it, those are from inside the plant. Those are records from the workers that have documented. Maybe if you scroll down within the document, you can do that. So basically it shows you where those pellets are released. And what I learned from Diane and from expert testimony is that this plant is really mal-engineered. So the storm water mixes with the wastewater, and there's really no way to stop the pollution as it as it is engineered right now. But this is, I think, very important documentation to have. But you can go back. We can move on. There's loads more in there. Diane has sent us decades of newspaper coverage, some of which you see in the exhibit. And again, well, usually when I present this work, people ask me, how many people do you have working on this? It's a huge task, and it is. And it is, it's of course imperfect in many ways, but we're trying our best to make it available. I think we can go to the next. Back to the overview. Yeah, you can just click on the arrow here. Oops. Now if you go back to the other tab. Let's go to Indian. So what I learned from, we went on field trips to Indian County a couple of times after I arrived, and there are so many similarities both between Louisiana and Texas. Part of the history of Formosa is that they first planned to build the 6 naphtha cracker in Elan, so on the east coast, which there was a lot of resistance, and it was the overlap with the democratization of Taiwan, and so you saw the first mass protests were around preventing the 6 naphtha cracker from being built in Elan, and then there were plans to build it in Taoyuan, but eventually it was moved to Yunlin, and the kind of typical story is that it was being built there because the area was kind of considered impoverished and backwards, and people didn't have the kind of power to push back. But actually, a member of our team has made a timeline. If you could show that one. It's the first artifact in here. It's also again a collection of newspaper articles, but that very nicely documents the history of resistance in Yunlin. And we kind of played with color codes to show the intensity of the actions that people were taking. So these were the protests in Elan, which nicely by the director Ke, who runs the show Our Island. He has given us many historic photos from the time. He has documented this very extensively. yeah, so this is in 1990s in Taipei when fishermen and people from residents from Ilan came to Taipei to protest. And Ilan's mayor had a very important role and also did a TV debate with the head of Formosa Plastics, and that was very decisive in shifting the perception of this project and why it should not be built. And, can only recommend to check out the debate, which is on YouTube. And Formosa had backing from both from the KMT and from the US. So there is money that came into the building of the 6 NAFTA cracker. And so here we just have many different examples of how, for example, people who are unsure about what the 6 NAFTA cracker would mean for the area. It's not, I mean, of course, some people welcomed the project, but there was also concern and people were unsure what it would actually mean for them. And there's some newspaper coverage about that, where journalists interviewed villagers. Maybe next slide. Yeah. So, for example, there were people were congregating in the Gongfang temple and debating and organizing. This was in 1992. About 100 to 200 people actually attended the event. And this was exactly the time when martial law was lifted. So, it's, very interesting. And so there are more examples. Farmers and fishermen throwing eggs at the 6 NAFTA cracker construction site. So again, showing that there was actually protest and resistance. And the nice thing is on the website you can see kind of additional commentary. And when I presented this, especially historians, they were very excited about these kind of timelines. Okay, maybe we can go back and maybe Paul, would you say a few words about the lawsuit that you've been covering? So again, I mean, in Texas, a lot of the data came from Diane Wilson, and here in Lin, Brother Lin, a local fisherman, oyster farmer and fisherman, has been giving us a lot of data, and Paul has been doing research on Formosa Plastics over the 5 years, and Brother Lin was one key informant, I would say. And there's an ongoing lawsuit in Indian, so maybe you can say a little bit about it in the drawings. Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Tim, for organizing all this. Tim spent the last couple of days putting those court sketches into frames and putting the captions on it. So maybe if you have time after, I invite you to take a look. Those court sketches have started in like 5 years ago, 2016, when I attended the first court hearing. So, as you know, in Taiwan and many places, you cannot take photos inside the courtroom. So my assistant will take notes about what the lawyers and the judges say. And we are not supposed to record also. I remember once the judge was very angry because he thought we had recorded and we used those, the stupid things he says to launch a press conference, this sort of thing. So we took notes, a lot of notes. And what is interesting in Taiwan courts is that the stenographer will not write everything. Like it's a kind of consensual. It's a writing together. It's a consensus between the judge and the defendant and plaintiff's lawyers. What is the stenography? I mean, in Japan or in France, everything what the judge and the lawyers say would be written down. If the lawyers say "aso desu ka," then the stenographer will say "aso desu ka." But in Taiwan, no. There's a lot of interesting things that are being said by the judge or the lawyers will not be written down. That's why we have to do our best to write as much as we can. And then also it's interesting to well, I had this habit of taking sketches of the courts because it's just to capture the atmosphere and well, I'm a sociologist, but I must admit my sketches are not really neutral. I do not respect the Weberian principle of neutrality when I draw, and these days when we were preparing the captions with Tim, suddenly sometimes I had to remember because I found what I written down on the sketch is not precise enough. So I went back to the notes of my assistant or to several documents I got from the lawyers. But this I should not say. Anyway, I proposed to Tim to have a more objective view of what is being said at court, to print an example of my assistant notes. So it's about one court hearing. I guess this one was about 2 hours. And in yellow, it's the defendant's lawyer's part. In blue, it's the plaintiff's lawyers. And in purple, it's the judge. So you can see that the judge don't say much. You can see also that the defendant's lawyers speak a lot. Well, they always start. The judge always invite them to start. And then when it comes to the times for the defendant lawyers to speak, they have to hurry up. And obviously, the judge hasn't taken time to read the documents, all the documents they provided to, because before the court hearing, the lawyers will send documents to the judge so that he 他应该做功课啦，但是他完全不做，还难过。蒋宏律师要不要过来一下？你请过来一下，方便吗？ I'm glad we have with us Attorney Hong, who has been struggling a lot with the judge. 洪律师要不要讲几句话？你在云林地方法院的一些心得，然后比如说，我的第一次参加那个开庭是2016年3月，那时候詹春威律师有他应该是他的最后一个就是开庭的一次，然后就当年5月他要当环保副首长，所以我的感觉是詹律师不在之后，你们年轻律师会比较辛苦，对吧？对，要不要就讲，然后你跟法官的那个。 怎么说 ？Struggle， 争斗。Sorry.
Let me speak simply in Chinese. Okay. Okay. 我是2018年开始这个诉讼，然后那时候跟老板詹顺贵律师来做这个诉讼，然后有这个机会也非常的难得，因为台西。 跟麦寮那边的居民受到这样的空气污染已经很久了。那事实上，这个诉讼进行到现在还没有结束。然后，就像刚刚保罗老师所说的，这个诉讼一直在空转，因为法官可能欠缺证据，或者说他没有勇气去做出决定，所以这就是很可惜。就是虽然我们走到诉讼这个阶段，可能是下对上的也好，或是透过法律程序也好，可是目前还没有得到一个。 很好的判决，对民众做一个交代。那 OK， 那也谢谢保罗老师邀请，那也谢谢。
想问一下，这个你记得吗？这个是我的助理的笔记。
对，
黄色是被告
律师。
我所记得是，他们每次开庭的时候，法官会邀请现请被告 一直讲话，然后你们要等蛮久才有机会讲话。
对。
然后比如说那一次，我记得那个黄律师蛮生气，因为就是你们开始讲话的时候，法官就开始睡觉，就很明显就没有兴趣，对你们要讲的他对没有兴趣。
是，就是一开始都会原告被告陈述，是原告先讲说今天你们要告什么，你们的主张有什么，你们提出什么证据，然后我们讲完一段之后，被告他们请了6个律师，然后轮番去讲，每个律师大家都讲个10几20分钟，然后法官让他们畅所欲言，然后等到我们原告要对被告的说法做出反驳或是指证的时候，就只剩蓝色那个部分，然后常常被打断说，这个你们那个书面上已经写过了，写过你就不要讲了。就一直被打断，所以呈现出来就变成是黄色占了大部分。对 ，OK。
You can say for the Vietnamese.
Just briefly, you can say
what else?
Yeah. So, well, again, thank you very much.
Maybe, can say a few words about Brother Wu.
Lin, brother, yeah, Brother Wu.
Brother Wu.
Brother Wu. Too many brothers.
No, 吴大哥，吴日辉大哥是maybe you can show his picture, his photo.
I know it's difficult to show. The drawing we can show.
Okay,
maybe just better.
Yeah, okay. 吴大哥he has been a very precious informant for us, for our research there. Because, okay, one thing is that at the court, you would suppose that, okay, those people, those fence line communities, the reason they sue Formosa Plastic is because of the pollution. So, I mean, from my point of view, I mean, from what I saw in similar lawsuits in Japan, the first thing to do would be to listen to the plaintiffs, right? To understand why do they come to sue the company, and especially in that case, the judge, well, he's a lazy guy, but at least I think he had one wise request to the lawyers, was he asked them to translate in vernacular language the very complex debates between the lawyers about causality between, causality between air pollutants, air toxicants, and cancers. Because otherwise, the defendant lawyers would say, you have cancers every 5 minutes in cancer, you have someone in Taiwan with cancer. So how can you prove that those air toxicants from Formosa Plastic are the toxicants that cause the cancer of Mr. B or the lung cancer of Mrs. A, well, this sort of thing. So these debates on causality, then you have to bring epidemiology, you have to bring toxicology or clinical research anyway. So this comes very technical, very complex. And this is already difficult when you have a smart judge, but when you have a lazy guy, it's even more complicated. So the judge has, I think, a wise request was the lawyers should do a translation, and this is something STS scholars are familiar with, to translate into other language. So why not inviting the plaintiffs and ask them to say in plain Chinese? They can even talk plain Taiwanese, yeah, that's something the defendant lawyers was eager to do. You will enjoy to speak in Taiwanese to make that more, accessible to the judge. But anyway, I mean, the plaintiffs don't have this opportunity to come to the court and explain in plain words what is their suffering about and why do they sue the company. So we spend the whole time on complex discussions on causality. So this is where what you are doing here with this archive, putting all the very precious data from Brother Wu and other local people in Taiwan and Yunlin, is, I think you are translating those citizen science, you are making it accessible to more people across the seas from Taiwan to the US. I mean, I hope one day Diane can take a look at all you have accumulated on Taiwan and vice versa. people in Taiwan can take a look at all those amazing data from Diane Wilson. And so this is a citizen to citizen transfer of data and science and collective knowledge, I would prefer to say. And it's also, you have also put online journal articles by Professor Jiantong Chuan. Well, those are open access journal articles anyway, but the fact that you put them here is also a sign to say, okay, we can also convert classical science into citizen, well, not citizen science, but making those hard data more accessible to the citizens. So it's very interesting, transnational and cross-citizen, crossing the barriers of social class and social knowledges. Thank you very much, and congrats, team, for the great work you are doing.
We're a bit behind time, but let's we can.
Yeah, we should be careful not to walk here, right?
Yeah. Well, maybe we can just go back to the collection.
Thanks also to Professor Whitney, who is making the connection between the US and Taiwan.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's good that you remind us why are we doing that. So the connection between, for example, the lawyers in US and Taiwan is one thing that we're looking into right now. Lawyers are very busy people, and there's the language issues, and so far we've heard that lawyers on both sides really appreciate having access to this kind of documents. I also want to thank Xavier Sun, who is here, who has documented the plastic pollution in maybe you can say hi so people know that you're here. We have a small exhibit about the plastic pollution, and because of time I'm just going to move on, but Xavier has collected plastic pieces like Diane has done. And I think one of your main messages is that this kind of plastic pollution in Taiwan is not regulated at all right now. I've gone there myself. You can go there. You can go to the 6 naphtha cracker and pick up the plastic pieces with your hands. We have some samples over there, and some, like Diane has done, some civic. That's citizen science, absolutely. Okay, yeah, and Brother Lin, like Diane, has given us many newspapers and so on. So maybe let's quickly move on to Vietnam. Maybe we can be brief because there's also a slideshow downstairs. We're going to show a video. And again, Paul has done research in Vietnam on the.
Downstairs you have 2 slideshows. One is my photos when I went to Vietnam, and the other one is by Nancy Bui. Very interesting photos of the racing situation near the Formosa plant.
Yeah. Maybe we just show Father Hung's video very quick. It's just 2 minutes. If you could go down to the second video. And look at the slideshow downstairs. So, but we have friends from the Vietnamese community here, and Father Hung is sending his best regards, and really wanted to, couldn't make it tonight, so he sent the video. So but again, this is kind of the challenge and what we try to do to bring together this community that is quite dispersed. So and again, the archive, there's some NGO reports and research that Paul has done, but this is kind of one of the collections that is, growing. Maybe we can go back and just finish with a look at Louisiana. I think we can move on.
Can you show a little bit of Nancy's video?
I think the connection is a bit, yeah. Yeah. Okay. If you can try. Yeah.
30 seconds.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that would be great. The videos is always risky to have in presentations, but well, we want them here. So. researchers cannot really provide like that. Okay, I know we're running a little bit behind time. Just 5 more minutes. I want to give an update or insight into the St. James Parish part of the archive, if you can go back. So again, St. James Parish is on the Gulf Coast between Baton Rouge and New Orleans in Cancer Alley, where Formosa Plastic wants to build this, huge plastics complex. There's currently an injunction against, the building project. They lost at least 1 permit from the Army Corps of Engineers. So there are different very interesting civic data points. The way that this injunction was achieved was by using archaeological surveys of the site, which showed that there are slave cemeteries on the site, because this area, southern Louisiana, is also known as Plantation Country, is heart of the sugar plantations in the United States. And over the 20th century, you had a shift from the plantation economy to the petrochemical industry. And unfortunately, the area was also in the news last year because it had one of the highest COVID death rates in the United States, because people suffer from underlying conditions, from asthma, from lung cancer. So it was in the news. It was New York, and then maybe on the 3rd spot was this little town, Reserve, Louisiana, which is in St. James Parish. But there's an activist coalition led by the faith-based group Rise St. James, and they're doing amazing advocacy work and trying to stop Formosa from building there. Yeah, and it's an interesting reminder, what kind of data is useful. This archaeological survey, for example, that was first launched by Formosa itself. And then used by activists to make their case. Yeah, and so they're trying to prevent it from being built. And they also sent us some videos that are now part of the archive, and that we don't have time to show right now. But I encourage you to look at it, especially the video by Sharon Levine, who is leading Rise St. James. Is very impressive. And the small. This is kind of an aside. Earlier. In fall, we did a virtual exhibition in a collaboration with the Whitney Plantation Museum, which is is an outstanding institution in the area because it's one of the few, if not only, critical plantation museums. Because there are many museums that people visit, and there are people who have plantation weddings, and there's kind of a whole industry around visiting plantations in Louisiana. But this plantation museum is telling the story from the perspective of the enslaved, from the sugar plantation. And this was formerly owned by Formosa Plastics. This plantation was owned by Formosa until the late 1990s, when they sold it to a lawyer who then turned it into Whitney Plantation Museum. And they wanted to build the world's largest rayon synthetic fiber factory. And we're still working with the Whitney Plantation Museum to get some records of the museum that Formosa wanted to build there. So there are actually plans of some kind of Formosa museum on this plantation, which I think, looks very different from this one. So there's another virtual tour that is already on the disaster website, and you can kind of see how it can link to the archive. I think we can stop here for the Q&A. I'm so thankful that you were so patiently listening, and let's open it for questions. Questions for me, for Xavier, for Paul, for Wenling too. Thank you very much. Yeah.
You can repeat the question to the live stream.
Yes. Yeah. I will repeat the question. Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, I have to say I learned a lot from your presentation because I didn't touch on a lot of topics about this. And I have 2 questions. So the first question is about the situation in Texas. So my question is, what are the attitudes of the governments toward this topic? Because we know Texas in the South, and it's more like Republican dominated, so government tend to support the company. And what are the government's attitude towards this situation? And the second question is about the New England's courts.
Mm-hmm.
So as you say,
Can you give the microphone to the?
I will repeat the question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
So as you say, the judge kept saying that
that the pollutions has nothing to do with the cancer. And from your perspective, what can we do to make it more evident that these two things are relatable?
Okay, thank you for the question. So the first question was, what is the role of government in Texas and Louisiana when it comes to dealing with the fenceland communities and pollution and industry? The second question is how making evidence in the lawsuit can be supported. What can be done? I first say about the first one. Well, Diane would probably be an expert to talk to about dealing with the government in Texas. I'm more familiar with the situation in Louisiana, which, I mean, the governor of Louisiana has welcomed Formosa Plastics to come, the Governor Bell Edwards, and companies get very lucrative tax breaks in Louisiana, which there's pushback against that. And actually, I think it used to be the first 10 years were tax breaks for property tax for petrochemical companies, which was now changed to 5 or 6 years. But Formosa handed in their application one day before this came into effect. So if they build, they would still get the tax break. So I mean, Louisiana is one of the poorest state in the United States, and the argument is usually, of course, it brings money to the communities. People who work in the facilities are not the people that live right by. And there's very interesting coverage by ProPublica, for example, that show that many of the parts of these plants are, for example, manufactured in Latin America and then shipped to the US, sometimes even shipped back because it's cheaper than hiring domestic labor. So even those numbers, the kind of promise that those projects bring, you have to really investigate. So maybe that's what I can say. And I mean, Rice St. James is pretty good at putting pressure on the governor, for example, and the UN just recently released a statement kind of condemning or criticizing environmental racism in Cancer Alley. So, and there's hope with the Biden administration that, there's more commitment to equity there, but let's see, So that's maybe what I can say. The second question for Indian, it's a bit, for me, difficult topic to speak about because I'm not as involved, and the lawsuit is ongoing. So, I don't know, Paul, do you have anything to add about making evidence?
In Taiwan or?
In Taiwan, for the Yunlin case. What could be done? I mean, this is, you kind of get at the heart of why we were also on the fence. Should we hold this event? How should we do it? Because we don't want to impact it.
We have now.
You want to come here?
Maybe Whitney can also help me. If I understand well the situation, now we have like 3 lawsuits, 2 in the district court. No, sorry, 1 in the district court of Yunlin, which basically my sketches are about this one.
And it was lost, right? You have to say.
No. This one is ongoing.
But the other one.
No. Okay, what we attended last month, this is this board, the last board with the watercolors was in the High Court in Tainan.
Yeah.
It has just started. It's just for one person, one plaintiff, who has a kind of guinea pig, legal guinea pig, to try. It was a proposal, and it's another judge, actually a young judge, younger judge, more 比较认真的法官. So we had hopes, and but unfortunately, when I say we, it means 原告也就比较有希望. But unfortunately, the case was lost last October. That's why now we are at the Court of Appeal, which is in Tainan for we lost the case, but 嘉良刚刚跟我们说，其实他有阅读那个判决书，我还没有。他说那个判决书里面其实对我们有蛮多，有一些。Yeah, Sonia,对, you're the one. Can you say a few words about?
The evidence.
Okay. Sonia wants to keep low profile, but 没有，简单的说，那个，判决书你还没有看吗？那就麻烦你讲你的 因为他是法律系的，你怎么看？
应该这样讲，就是所有10个可以说10件争点里面，其实有8件是感觉起来是我们可能是原告比较有利，可是因为最后包含一些举证责任的部分，就可能他们认为说，可能这个案子跟以前不知道前几年不知道大家知不知道像 RCA 案或者是中石化案这样子的公开诉讼，法院其实有因为考量原告跟被告的实力相差太大，所以就翻转了举证责任。但是在这个案件里面，法院考量了种种因素之后，就认为说，没有办法适用这样子的判决先例，所以最后因为这些比较关键的，比如像举证责任的部分没有办法翻转，那因为没有办法翻转举证责任的情况下，就是原告必须要负担举证责任，那没有办法证明，那就开始。对，目前比较简明的讲，应该是这样。
我就现在听到你这样说明，我就想起来在地方法院那个另外一个案子，所以不是那个就是空中法官的那个案子。那个被告律师一直强调，其实这个案例不是公开诉讼。他妈的，如果这个不是公开诉讼，什么是公开诉讼？但是那个被告律师真的可以这样乱讲，是因为法官就没有拒绝。那我猜你这样，听这样说明，我猜那个另外一个法官没有接受这种说明。应该其他另外一个法官应该是起码就是基本原则，这个是一个公开诉讼。
对，另外一个法官其实是在这方面是可能的。
所以我们会有希望，但是这种诉讼知道吗？就是无论如何，那个都要花很多时间。你看 RCA 案，就是秋会设立的，1998年，第一个案例是2004年开始，然后等到2007年真的开始了，开庭了，然后就等到2015年才有地方法院的判决，然后高等法院2017，最高法院2018，然后还没有结束，快要结束，希望快要结束。好，大概就是这样。Sorry, we're shifting time.
Yeah, well, that's why we do the teamwork. Yeah, so more questions? Any more? Yeah.
This is maybe a little bit of a transition question, but so 2 questions. The first is could you give a little bit of context sort of for the audience in terms of the setup for the exhibition tonight, in terms of the different kind of stations that we have set up? And the second question is about, are there ways for audience members who are interested in contributing to the Formosa Plastics Archive? Can you sort of give a little bit of a sketch of what that might look like?
Yeah. Okay, so first question is about the layout of the exhibition, and the second one, how can you be involved? So the layout of the exhibition is actually you come up the stairs, right? And you will have some introductory text, including preface by Kim Fortune, which I think gets at your second question, why we need to pay attention to the petrochemical industry and linking communities. And you can basically walk around and follow Paul's sketches, and there are, you end up in this room, and there are a few Easter eggs and QR codes on the way that might take you on a different path. Of course, related to the exhibit, maybe I don't say more here. You can go and discover and pull out your phone. And there's a QR code, or you can just visit the website. You're welcome to explore the platform. The PDFs don't work on mobile right now, unfortunately, where you can look at. It's better to look at it on desktop. And how you can be involved, as I said, you can register on the platform, and it's best to let me know. Maybe if you're interested, you can talk to me tonight. If you want to have access to the material, if you are, maybe a journalist, or if you do research, or if you just want to, learn about Taiwan. That's how we envisioned this as a civic data resource. And as a way to track Formosa Plastics and follow the petrochemical industry, which is in decline, and is, as many of us know, not a sustainable industry. And we actually talked to experts who look at the financing of Formosa Plastics very closely, who might say maybe it might be better for Formosa Plastics if the plant is not being built. There are very interesting dynamics about the petrochemical industry in China and the U.S. trade war, and actually we can use support to lay that out a little bit better. But also there are upcoming reports about Formosa Plastics that are going exactly in that direction. So if you want to stay up to date about these issues, I think the archive is one way. And we always, I think we can use people who can help translate or add commentary if you're in any way interested in that. I think that's one way to be involved. And we are very open to new ideas. I mean, those are just things that I can imagine. So yeah, but and especially ways to make the archive, to make it come alive. Events like this, I think, are very important for this archive to really shine and bring people together. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Have there been any attempts of making these activists, as Diane Wilson, her work more difficult, respectively, even threats or something? I mean, I know of other people like her who really have suffered threats or.
Yeah, so the question is, have activists like Diane faced pushback from Formosa? Diane went to jail for a couple of months for protesting on Formosa's side, and I mean, had frequent run-ins. Yeah, even within the petrochemical industry in the US, Formosa is known as a bad player. And yeah, I mean, I think there's no way to argue around that. An interesting detail is Diane actually sent some of the plastic pellets that she collected to Louisiana. And this was around this time last year. And they did kind of a stunt and dropped the activists from Rice and James, so from the Louisiana Bucket Brigade, who works with Rice and James. They dropped the pellets at the door of an oil and gas lobbyist, left a note and said, don't open it, don't give it to kids, and if you want to get rid of it, give it to Formosa Plastics to recycle. They were arrested 6 months later by the sheriff, leading up to this event that was actually, they had a Juneteenth gathering close to the grave sites on the Formosa, where they want to build. And leading up to this event, 2 activists and advocates were arrested by the sheriff. And I mean, it had a scare tactics. I mean, they were released, and but yeah, that's no coincidence. And Formosa here domestically has tried to take researchers to court. I mean, has taken researchers to court. Have lost, but yeah. So that's one of the questions that I had for people like David Rosner and Jared Markowitz that run Toxic Docs, this website that has like thousands of declassified documents. They get letters from lawyers every week. But there was Columbia University, so Columbia is taking care of it, and usually they can figure it out, and they have so much data that it's even hard to find, but they get those letters. So yeah, we are also, trying to stay clear of that. Yeah. So yeah. Maybe 1 or 2 more questions, and then we can wrap it up if there are questions. Yeah, Karen.
Well, I'm just fascinated by the global scale of this kind of movement and the way, because the court cases are all local, Texas, Taiwan, and yet through the website, you're bringing people together. And, we had, Diane talking about how that encouraged her, but I was wondering if there are other ways in which these kind of collaborations are actually substantively helping the movement actually advance its causes, and also how you're dealing with language, translation between all these different, do you have Vietnamese version of the site? And then third is are there other examples of projects like this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the question is how does the website support this global community of Formosa affected communities, the links, and what's the role of translation, for example, into Vietnamese? I can say, well, they're doing amazing work, and I mean, I'm a latecomer to all of this, so it's, I'm deeply admire, the work that Diane has done and Rice St. James has done. And again, Diane has come here to the Formosa, stakeholder meetings and given the Black Planet Award, So all of that has happened, and I think there's some practical things like the meetings in Louisiana take place at 4 a.m. Taiwan time. So we've struggled to attend, but of course, that still happens, and there are people, especially here at the Environmental Rights Foundation, that make the meetings, and those connections are there. I do think we can help translate some of the documents. I think that's something we can do, and we started with English and Mandarin, and I think Vietnamese, we should also do, and we might even have some people who can help with that. And in the group in Louisiana is in the same. When they write a report, they also want to translate it into other languages. So I think we can just be supportive, I think. And are there other examples? Nothing that comes to mind right now. I think about it, but yeah, I think that's something that's worth exploring. What links between those domestic cases, very local cases, need to be made? Yeah, and it's, for example, a question that I have trouble answering because my background is not in law, but we have people, luckily here that can address that. So I think, and my hope is, but that's maybe a little bit, ambitious, that working together on maybe like a nice photo essay or a slideshow can actually bring people together. One question that the group in Louisiana had was about environmental racism in Taiwan, which is how they frame, of course, a lot of the issues going on. But they said, well, we don't really know about Taiwan. Like, is this, what are the terms that we can use? How can we frame it? So I imagine that maybe working on this kind of project could be interesting. But of course, people have a lot of things to do, and especially in Louisiana, they're doing 1,000 things. And yeah, so. Okay, that's a great question. Okay. Anything else? Well, I think that's a nice point to end, because we also have, a small blackboard with Post-its. If you have ideas or impressions, feel free to share them. I think this is really, the archive is now, we were so busy just documenting and collecting, but I think now it's time to strategize. So if you can help us do that, and if we can do it together, that would be fabulous. And so, yeah, let's open the exhibition, and thank you so much.
So as Tim said, we have.
Oh. Can you pull up the slideshow one more time? Just one more announcement that I forgot to make. If you could go to the next slide. Yeah. So there's a beach cleanup tomorrow. If you want to go to Elan, if you want to go to the heart of where the Formosa resistance started, Next Gen Foundation is organizing a beach cleanup. Okay, and so I mean, there's back and forth. Does it make sense to pick up trash? And of course, we should hold the source accountable. But I will definitely go. I will go on the tour. I haven't been to Elan myself yet, and so you can still sign up. Right? Isn't it right? There's still seats available to go tomorrow morning to Elan. We're meeting at 11:45.
So we are starting in Elan at 11:45.
Yeah.
If people want to go with us out of Taipei, we're meeting at Taipei Main at 9 a.m. Where? Exit South 2. So it's the exit at street level facing Zhongxiao Road. If you have any questions, you can come find me.
Yeah. Okay.
Great. Yeah, so as Tim said, the exhibit is open. We also have drink services downstairs. I'm Daniel, I'm a member of New Bloom. Just to give you all a sense of sort of other program that's happening in this space coming up in the next few weeks. We have a Mandarin to English language exchange happening next Friday. We also have a talk coming up a little bit further on, but on April 16th on Indigenous feminism in Taiwan. So be on the lookout on Facebook for more information about that. So thank you all so much for coming tonight.
Two more things. I want to give one very, very big round of applause for you, Anko, who helped me set up the exhibit. And we didn't identify a lot of people on the slides for different reasons, but I want to give a very big round of applause for you, Anko. You want to say something, Xavier? Sorry.
About breaking from plastic.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I'm the first one that found that there are also the plastic pellets pollution in Mailiao, and I created my own NGO. It's called Taiwan Zero Waste Alliance, and our main goal is to target the very upstream of the plastics, that is the plastic noodles and Formosa plastic petrochemical. So I have been there is a global movement called BFFP, Break Free from Plastic, and there are many pillars. For example, we have to ban some single-use plastics. We have to make some like community-based waste treatment methods instead of centralized. And the other one recently added on is to the anti-petrochemical extension program. So we also have several days ago, the Taiwan team, the Formosa platform, has this online meeting with the BFP Breaking from Plastic group. Most of them are from the US. Yeah. And so because we all know that the US is a huge petrochemical country, as well as maybe Europe, and Taiwan is a very specific case here because in Southeast Asia, I think the largest petrochemical industry might be in Mailiao, which the area you can see it's right in the satellite image, which is much larger than that of in Texas. So that is why I went back from Texas. I learned something from Diane Wilson, and there are some whistleblowers like Ronnie and Dale, and I know how to find those. And unfortunately, I really found huge amounts of pellets. So, but right now in our environmental law, there is no regulation on those pellet leakage at all. So no leakage, but there are maybe like millions or trillions of them over there. If you're interested, I can actually take you over there and show you how horrible it is, because the main product of their most primary plastic is pellets. Those pellets are smaller than 5 millimeters.
Like in Texas.
Yeah, exactly like those in Texas. They are all smaller than 5 milliliters, and that is our global identification global definition of microplastics. So they are in the beginning, they are microplastics. And I have to say a few more about Diane Wilson's work, because since 2016, they have promised the TCEQ, Texas Center for Environmental Quality, that they will not leak any kind of pellets. And also, they have produced powder form of PVCs. So that is why they are fined like $50 million in 2019. Right? But however, I have frequently talked with Diane Wilson and Ronnie and Dale. Until now, they are still serving those sampling areas, and they are still looking. They still found no matter plastic pellets or PVC powders every day in those sampling areas. So I think the story is not ending, or it's an ongoing story. So I think there will be, because I think $5 million for Formosa is just a piece of cake, and I think there should be some
50 million.
50 million, yeah. There should be more strict measures, and so they will really feel the pain. Yeah.
Well,
but no, in Taiwan there's no law regulating this kind of shit.
There's lots of work to do, so now we know. Okay, thank you guys. Maybe we can remove the chairs so people can walk around. Okay.
The chairs up there.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you guys. All right. Enjoy the exhibition and feel free to talk to Xavier and Paul and everybody.